Hello and welcome. If you haven't already, I invite you to please click subscribe. There's no obligation, and it allows you to be notified of all new chapters. Additional information about the story, including the author, chapter warnings, and rating, can be found in the description below. All credit goes to the original author. All That Remains by Orphan Account, Chapter 17, The Spar. Third Age, 2956, 55 years ago. Early the next day, Legolas found himself headed to Mirkwood's training grounds with Aragorn, Fael, and the twins. More specifically, he was unwillingly being dragged to said training grounds by 4 determined warriors. "I told you, I don't want to train here," the elf protested uncomfortably for the 3rd time. "I don't need to either." "You don't have to train," Fael said stubbornly. "We're not even going there to train. You've been shown every part of the palace and grounds except for where the warriors train. We're just completing your tour. I don't see why you're so against going there." "I don't want to go because if any warriors are there, they'll want to see me fight or spar with me," the assassin thought, but did not say. While he was glad that he had exposed himself to the elves and saved Thranduil's life, he wished that the warriors had not witnessed or heard about his prior accomplishments in battle. Almost every time he ran into one, they were sizing him up, questioning his abilities, or wanting to test themselves against him. Legolas was only comfortable with sparring with Glorfindel, because he knew the other elf would not become angry when he beat him. Many of the warriors that approached him were not asking to spar out of curiosity, but out of an arrogant need to prove themselves by besting the hidden guardian. When Legolas defeated them, some would lash out in anger, or would remain bitter and cold. The assassin did not want to draw attention to himself, and most definitely did not want to have arrogant elves holding a grudge against him. He knew he would defeat the elves that fought him. It was not overconfidence or arrogance that powered this thought, but fact. Siren had taught him how to fight and defeat his own kind swiftly, telling the much younger Legolas the elves' weaknesses, and frequent spars with Glorfindel had kept those skills sharp. When sparring, the assassin had a choice: to draw out the fight, or to end it instantly. As an assassin, he was more inclined to end fights quickly, unless he was mock fighting with the Balrog Slayer. With Glorfindel, he used spars to learn. These warriors had no interest in teaching or learning. So that left Legolas with a dilemma. Should he end the fight immediately and make them angry that they were defeated so fast? Or should he draw it out and make them mad that he was not fighting at his best? Then again, his best was killing, so no matter what, he had to hold back. The violet-eyed elf could not find a way to explain this to his friends, however, and reluctantly let himself be dragged to the training grounds. It was early morning, so many of the warriors would be present. Mirkwood's training grounds consisted of a large clearing in the woods. There were specific areas for each kind of weapon and intent. One area was for archers, with targets hanging in the trees. Another was filled with dummies used for basic sword training. The final, open space was intended for sparring with an opponent. Currently, a small bit of that space was occupied by Baraneth and a warrior that Legolas recognized as Lane, the reddish-brown-haired warrior that had been injured during the flood so long ago. The two were in the leather armor of their realm, moving about the area that was their sparring ground as their swords clashed. Other warriors stood in a wide circle around them, intent on the fight between the princess and the Ellen. "That looks interesting," Elladan said, silver eyes riveted on the spar. "Want to watch?" The others nodded in assent, and Legolas's group joined the spectators, staying towards the back but still able to see. The assassin's violet eyes followed the two warriors' movements carefully. As they watched, Baraneth blocked a stab directed towards her torso, stepping forward boldly and attacking Lane with a barrage of blows. Her feet were sturdy and firm on the ground, but she still had the fluent grace of the elves, able to shift from position to position quickly. "Are the blades blunted?" Legolas asked Fael. The silver-haired prince shook his head. "No. After an elf is a warrior for 500 years, we fight with sharp weapons. Novices, rookies, and young warriors fight with blunted blades." Legolas watched as Baraneth knocked Lane's defense away, touching the point of her sword to his chest. The warrior nodded, conceding defeat, and a cheer went up from the spectators as they congratulated their princess. Baraneth accepted their praise with a smile, nodding her thanks as her eyes scanned the ring. Her brown eyes found the assassin in the crowd, and he tensed. "Nazgûl," she called, tone light and cheery. "Would you like to spar?" Her smile was friendly, but her eyes were suspicious and cold. The assassin felt a mixture of annoyance, anger, and sadness. When he spoke, his tone was calm and soft. "I would rather not, princess. I don't usually fight in front of such a large group." Baraneth laughed, a laugh that was both mocking and false. "There is no need to be shy, Nazgûl. I'm sure you'll be fine." All eyes were on him, intense and glaring. The warriors were eager. They wanted to see him fight. They wanted to see how great of a warrior he was. Either that or they wanted Baraneth, their princess warrior, to defeat him. Legolas's anger was building, but he hid it behind a polite mask. "I am dangerous, princess," he said softly. "I might hurt you. Because you are not one to take defeat kindly, especially from me. You will strike out, and I will be forced to retaliate. Please do not push me," he thought. "I'm sure I don't have to worry about that," she said dismissively. "It's odd. You almost seem afraid to fight me." A few of the elves sneered at the insult to Nazgûl's bravery, muttering agreement. Next to the assassin, the twins were livid. Aragorn was glaring at the princess, and Fael looked shocked. Baraneth had just called Legolas a coward. That was a terrible insult to any warrior. Against the jeers, anger, and shock around him, Legolas was icy calm. Now they were trying to pressure him into fighting. It was either spar or be labeled a coward. Protocol and politeness went out the window, and the assassin let all emotion drain from his eyes and expression. He would not let Baraneth goad him into a fight. "You show your desperation through your words, princess," he said coolly. "I will not fight you because you have a need to prove yourself. I fight to protect, to kill, and to learn, not for meaningless entertainment." He turned around and began to walk away, pushing through the crowd of elves. "Walk away, Legolas," he told himself. "Walk away." The princess bristled and spoke with venom dripping from her every word. "I should have known that an elf raised by a cowardly human would be—" "What did you just call my father?" A chill went over the training grounds as the assassin spoke in a voice more terrifying than a Nazgûl's shriek. It was a hiss that somehow lacked all emotion, so apathetic and cold that it seemed to hold no emotion. And yet, there was no denying what Nazgûl was feeling. The assassin was beyond angry. He turned to glare at Baraneth, who did not quail beneath his glowing violet eyes. The princess smirked at him. "I called him a worthless, miserable coward," she sneered. Legolas closed his eyes, anger rushing through him. Slowly, painfully, he let it go, serene calm rushing in its place. He must not fight out of anger. Anger was a terrible motive and reason. But he could not walk away. Not now that the princess had insulted Siren. That left one option. The assassin stepped into the ring, staring expressionlessly at Baraneth. The princess was still smirking. Legolas did not react with ire. He just stared at her. "Very well, princess. I will spar with you. But remember, you brought this upon yourself." Baraneth scoffed and raised her weapon, raising an eyebrow at him. "Aren't you going to draw your knives?" "No," he said shortly. She shrugged, uncaring. Lane began the countdown, standing at the edge of the ring. 3, 2, 1, begin. It happened too fast for even the quickest elves to follow. Before Baraneth could even move, she was down, sword skittering across the ground with Esgol standing over her. A single blow to the warrior's solar plexus had sent her to the ground, winded, stunned, and unable to comprehend what had happened. Legolas glared down at her, violet eyes blazing. "If you had accepted my declination of the spar with grace, or asked me to be your opponent for reasons other than showing off to your friends, I would have gladly fought with you, warrior to warrior. Instead, you insulted my father, the bravest man I have ever known, and tried to pressure me into sparring with you. Before the spar began, you did not even bother to lay down rules that allowed me to use all of my skills, including my knowledge of pressure points. I am an assassin. I am dangerous, and I am way out of your league." There was no arrogance in the elf's voice, only deadly fact. "Despite that, and despite me being the hidden guardian, I am not a weapon. I am not a way to test your skills. I am not some experiment you need to poke and prod to see if I react. I am an elf like you all, and I am sick and tired of idiotic Delorsians trying to bully, use, and abuse me. You do not care about who I am. You only care that I am an assassin and a weapon. You see me as an opponent to defeat and overcome. I don't care if you try to make yourselves great warriors, but don't you dare try to use me to make a name for yourself." He did not shout, but he may as well have. The elves and Baraneth, who had recovered, were all silent, guilt and shame warring on their faces. Legolas looked up, and his violet eyes were filled with bitter pain. The agony in the violet orbs was so great that the elves and Aragorn had to look away. Then the assassin spoke, and his voice was choked and strained with emotion. "I never should have revealed myself to you." And he ran, vanishing into the trees. "Esgol!" Aragorn shouted, starting after the assassin. A hand on his arm stopped him, and he looked up to see Glorfindel standing there, eyes dark and expression tense. "How much did you see?" Elrohir asked quietly. The Balrog Slayer's face turned even more somber. Enough. Piercing blue eyes landed on Baraneth, and the Vanya glowered at the princess. "Words cannot express how disappointed and disgusted I am with you. I will be talking to your father about this." Everyone flinched at his tone. Never, in all the years they had seen Glorfindel, had they ever seen him that angry with an elf. Orcs, yes, but an elf? Never. His voice shook with barely contained rage, and his glow seemed to ripple and expand with his anger. He was not friendly, cheerful Glorfindel, but an elf lord who looked ready to strike them down. "Glorfindel," Elrohir began hesitantly. "I'm going after him. Stay here," he said flatly. The four that had come with Esgol flinched. The Balrog Slayer's expression softened slightly. "I am not angry at you. You four are of the few people here who accept Esgol for who he is. I thank you for that." Without another word, the Balrog Slayer ran swiftly into the forest, leaving 4 worried friends and many ashamed elves behind him. The elves watched him go, before the warriors began to gather in small groups, murmuring softly to each other. Elrohir looked at his twin, Fael, and Aragorn, who was still staring worriedly into the trees. "We should go back to the palace." Fael and Elladan nodded in agreement, but Aragorn did not respond. They headed down the path to the Elven King's home, keeping their silence. Elladan finally broke it, his shift from quiet to speaking so fast that Fael flinched. "I cannot believe those idiots treated Esgol like that," the older twin spat, fists clenched in rage. Fael looked at the ground, eyes closed tightly. "I am ashamed of my comrade's actions. No, ashamed does not even begin to describe how I feel. I don't even want to associate with them, or my sister." "Why would Baraneth act like that?" Elrohir questioned. "I know that she is strong-willed and fiery, but I've never seen her so cold, cruel, and arrogant." "She doesn't trust Esgol," Fael revealed bitterly. "And ever since Naneth died," the prince winced, "she has been even less tactful and polite than usual." "Sorry, Fael," Elladan said vehemently, "but I am not going to be forgiving her for a long while. What she did was beyond rude and uncalled for. How could she stoop so low?" "She wanted to test herself against Esgol, obviously," the younger twin muttered. He paused, looking around, and a panicked expression appeared on his face. "Where's Estelle?" The other 2 elves halted in their tracks, turning around. The human was not there. Slowly, the 3 elves looked at each other, then at the forest. "Ada is going to kill us," Elladan said flatly. Legolas sat in the tree that was above Siren's grave, leaning against the bark with glassy eyes. He was not crying, but tears of frustration prickled at his eyes. Stupid, bloody, arrogant elves. Why couldn't they just leave him alone? That was what he got for revealing himself to so many strangers. Now that everyone in Mirkwood knew about him, they were interested in him. The counselors wanted to prod into his past and question him. The Eleth wanted to flirt with and stalk him, and the warriors saw him as a challenge or a loose cannon, and wanted to best him in a fight. Could they not see that he just wanted to be with his friends and be normal for once? Could they not tell that he wanted to be treated just like any other elf? He did not want to be seen as an assassin, or a weapon to be used at their disposal. He did not want to be an opponent for the warriors to try to defeat, to test their skills against the legendary hidden guardian. He just wanted to be Legolas, or Esgol, if one was to be technical. He wanted to have friendly spars and play pranks with his friends. He wanted to sit beneath the stars without being bothered. He wanted to be free. Free of judging eyes, free of stone walls, free of protocol and niceties he did not like or understand. Legolas looked down at his hands, rubbing his fingers against the smooth, pale, but not glowing palms of his skin. Maybe if he let his glow out, they would accept him? The assassin scoffed and chided himself as soon as the thought formed. Having stayed at the palace for only 1 day, and he was already considering changing himself to try to appease others. He would never do that. He would never change who he was because someone thought he should or thought he was strange. His lack of a glow was part of who Legolas was now, and idiotic elves who did not understand would not make him change that. Besides, his suppressed glow was not just for helping him hide in shadows, talk to shadowed trees, and remain hidden from enemies that could sense elves. An elf's glow represented their inner light and was an extension of their soul. It was a piece of themselves that they exposed to the world, showing their strength and light. That was why Legolas would not let his glow out, because while inner lights could provide hope and light, they also allowed a piece of the elf to be touched by the outside world, including being touched by shadow. That was a reason that the elves were reacting badly to the ever-growing darkness. That was why they were losing strength and fading. It was why they were being called across the sea, so they would not eventually fade away or succumb to the shadow that was slowly eating away at their souls. But the assassin knew it could not be helped. The other elves would never be able to suppress their glow like he could. They could dim it, but not make it vanish. Yet Legolas's glow was not vanished per se. It was not merely hidden. His inner light was now truly inside him. Specifically, it was around his heart, mind, and soul. Long ago, when he first came to Dol Guldur, Siren taught him to suppress his glow. In actuality, he taught Legolas how to take it and change it into an impenetrable shield. His inner light protected his heart, soul, and mind, so they would never be touched by evil, darkness, or anything that wished to enter without his permission or with evil intent. Instead of his light being shown, it was inside him, stronger than ever because it was untouched by the darkness in the outside world. Because of this, Legolas would never quail beneath the presence of darkness. Because of this, he would never fall to the heaviness of the shadow alone. If all other lights in the world went out, and all other elves fell beneath the sickening darkness, he would still be there, a fighter for the light, unbreakable in spirit and mind, even if his body itself was broken. He would remain, because no darkness would ever claim him. He was Legolas, Esgil, Daelas, and Brian. He was the hidden guardian, Hashras, and a deadly assassin. He had violet eyes, he did not glow, and he was proud of it. That did not mean that the warrior's words and actions did not hurt, though. Legolas sensed the person coming before he saw him and sighed, but did not run off through the trees. If he did, the stubborn Balrog slayer coming towards him would just keep following him. A moment later, Glorfindel emerged below him, looking up at the assassin with worried blue eyes. Esgil? The violet-eyed elf did not speak or move. He idly wondered how Glorfindel had found him. The light trees would converse with the Vanya, but the shadowed trees would not. Maybe the golden-haired elf had followed the general sense of direction he had went to hear. Legolas found that he did not care. Glorfindel eyed the black bark in front of him, but set his jaw, speaking determinedly. "I'm coming up." He began to climb, and was surprised that the tree did not hiss or throw him off. The shadowed tree sensed that this too bright elf would comfort Daelas. Daelas was sad, so it let the elf up onto its branches. The too bright elf's presence hurt, but Daelas needed comfort that the tree could not provide. Glorfindel settled down next to the silent elf, looking at him from the corner of his eye. "Do you want to talk about it?" "What is there to talk about?" the assassin asked flatly. "Baraneth and the other warriors are acting like pushy children who are jealous of the new babe their parents brought home." The Balrog slayer's lips twitched at his description, before he sobered. "They are jealous of your skills, and feel like they need to prove themselves." "Why can't they find another way to prove themselves?" Legolas demanded. "It insults me that they wish to spar with me with the purpose of trying to show that they are a better warrior than I am. Don't they understand how much I have trained and fought to get to where I am? I've been trained to be an assassin since I was 5. I don't just use my weapons to fight. I use my body and my knowledge of my opponent to take them out quickly, cleanly, and without a fuss. Why can't they see that I am a different type of fighter than them, and realize that they can't beat me one-on-one with their skill set? I fought 30 berserker orcs before and won. Not only that, but they see me as a weapon or a threat. Why can't they see I just want to be free? The assassin sounded plainly miserable, and Glorfindel's heart went out to the young elf. He reached over and hugged Legolas, who stiffened in his arms before relaxing. Those warriors are conceited idiots who cannot see the small things along with the big picture, he said quietly. They see a legend and a strong warrior, not an elf that just wants some friends. Trust me, I know about this. Legolas closed his eyes, recalling one of the Balrog Slayer's many tales about what it had been like when he first came back from the dead and was in Rivendell. Many of the elves had been in such awe of Glorfindel that they had not noticed that he did not want to be bothered by them, and only wanted quiet and peace to mourn and adjust to the situation he found himself in. Elrond and Aristor had greatly helped with the Balrog Slayer's recovery, being friends instead of admirers, and scolding and warding off those who wished to intrude on the Vanya. Not only that, but a couple warriors wanted Glorfindel to start leading them and going out on patrols immediately. They got a severe tongue lashing from an enraged Elrond, and were sent swiftly on their way. The memory of Glorfindel's booming laughter as he told Legolas of the event made the assassin smile, but his melancholy did not fade. "At least they were not scared of you," he whispered. "If they are, that is their problem," the Balrog Slayer said stubbornly. "And I don't think you will have to worry about them bothering you any more. Aragorn will most likely punch the next person that looks at you wrong. Fail will give them an icy prince glare, and the twins will prank them in some humiliating and terrible way. That is not even including how livid Thranduil is going to be. I didn't mean to cause a rift in their family. I did not mean to become someone they all heard of. I did not want to be a spectacle for them to stare at," Legolas mumbled. Glorfindel scowled and poked him in the forehead, making the assassin glare at him. "It is the royal family's decision to choose a side, and it is not your fault that everyone seems to think that there needs to be sides. They are the idiots who are making a big deal out of this. Eventually, they will learn to treat you like anyone else, or leave you be. You're not a legend to be fawned over. You're a person who just wants acceptance. Just ignore them, and if you need to, I'll give you my full permission to knock out anyone who tries to bully or use you." Legolas thought about this for a long while. Then he nodded, slow and hesitant, and a more genuine smile crossed his face. "Thank you, Glorfindel. Even with the elves being nosy and insensitive, I'm glad I showed myself to Estelle, Elladan, and Elrohir and Fael. And Elrond, Aristor, and the Elven King too. They do not judge me, and accept me readily. They also do not try to force me to be the hidden guardian, when I only wish to be Esgol." Glorfindel smiled back at him. "I'm serious about you knocking them out. Try punching them in the face, or maybe the nose. It's always fun to break their nose." The assassin stared at him, eyebrows raised. "Well, aren't you a violent one? Are you speaking from experience?" "Maybe," the Vanya said mischievously. Legolas laughed, a musical, beautiful sound. "Why are you laughing?" Glorfindel pouted. "I'm just teaching my little brother the important skills of life." The violet-eyed elf stopped mid-laugh, staring at him with wide eyes. "What did you just call me?" The Balrog Slayer turned pink and shifted nervously on the branch, freezing as the shadow tree rustled in warning. "You heard me, Esgol." "You see me as your little brother?" the elf asked dazedly, suddenly sounding very young. Seeing his shocked confusion, Glorfindel spoke gently. "Yes, I do." Legolas stared at him, struck mute and unsure of how to respond. Now that he thought about it, Glorfindel was like an older brother to him. He was a friend, confidant, and a strong presence that he could rely on if the assassin needed to. That was what a sibling did, right? All Legolas knew was that he felt safe, secure, and happy whenever he was with the Vanya. He felt like he could act his relatively young age, and did not need to hide his emotions or put up a front. The Balrog Slayer could not be his father figure. Siren would hold that place in his heart if, or until, he remembered his birth family, and the assassin had seen too much of Glorfindel's playful side to call him that. Yes, the title of brother made sense. "I see you as an older brother," Legolas admitted slowly. "I would like to call you Gwador, if that's all right." Glorfindel's grin was so wide that the violet-eyed elf was sure that it would split his face in half. "Of course it is all right," he exclaimed joyfully. Legolas perked up, expression brightening. He hugged Glorfindel tightly, mumbling into his shoulder, "Thank you. You don't know what this means to me." The Balrog Slayer chuckled softly. "I think I might have a vague idea." The younger elf nodded against his shoulder, both happy and overwhelmed. Long ago, he had never expected acceptance from an elf lord like Glorfindel, but now here he was, with said lord as a brother of the heart. The shadowed trees around the two elves could not understand most of the conversation between the two, but they saw how much Dalis cared for the too bright, golden-haired, glowing elf, and how the elf made Dalis smile. Dalis cared for the too bright elf, more than the trees had ever seen him care for any elf their Shadowleaf had rescued. The too bright Glorfindel elf was precious to Dalis. Pained but determined, the shadow trees embedded too bright Glorfindel into their memories, passing on his image to their kin. "Do not harm too bright Glorfindel," they told each other, intent on remembering this important fact. "He is close to Dalis. Dalis is Gwadir? Gwador, 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 Gwador." The Sindarin word hurt their voices, but still they spoke it, passing on the message. Legolas heard them speaking, and looked up, smiling slightly. "Gwador," he told them, "brother." They rustled and waved, but did not hiss. Glorfindel was Dalis' heart-brother. They would not hurt him. They would keep him safe for Dalis. The Balrog Slayer frowned deeply, closing his eyes and straining his ears as he tried to discern something from the trees' dark voices. He blinked twice, listening harder, then turned to Legolas. "Did they just say Gwador?" "Yes," Legolas murmured. "They will not hurt you now, and they will help you if you are in trouble. They do not care about friends of mine, but you are now a brother of my heart. I already lost my heart, father. They don't want me to lose anyone else." Glorfindel was quiet, his glow dimmed to a soft sheen, the most that any elf other than the assassin could lower their inner light, and he reached up, touching a black leaf on the tree. The tree trembled slightly, but did not lash out, only a small spark of pain going through it before it faded. Too bright Glorfindel was warm, it realized. His hands were warm, like Dalis' hands. Warm, but not painful like the other elves' touch. "Even in greatest darkness, there is still hope and light," Glorfindel murmured, watching as a black branch slowly and gently wrapped around his hand. "Yes," Legolas murmured. "Almost everything has good within it. The only things that I have ever heard of or come across that hold no good are orcs, goblins, wargs, the Nazgûl, the Dark Lords, and demons. They have fully given themselves to darkness and the shadow, in such a way that they are a slave to it. These trees, the tree they sat in touched his shoulder with its branch, did not choose to become like this. Even now they still fight and rebel against evil, choosing to side with me rather than the darkness. Their free will is only hindered, not completely gone. The assassin sighed deeply and looked up, where the sky was covered with gray clouds. The Balrog Slayer looked up as well and smiled, pointing at a cloud. That one looks like a rabbit. Legolas was startled into laughing before he too pointed. And that one looks like a giant hand. That one is a dog. A dog? It looks more like a squashed toad. It does not. It is a dog. Is not. Is too. Is not. Glorfindel snorted and shook his head. 5 minutes into it, and we're already acting like brothers. His expression turned solemn, and he looked directly at Legolas. Do you want to stay here for a bit, or go back? The assassin thought about it, then leapt down from his perch, landing lightly on his feet. I will have to face them all eventually, so I might as well make it now. Glorfindel landed beside him and straightened. Good. The longer you stay out here, the more time they'll have to gossip. Legolas scoffed. That is another part of society that I'm glad to have not been exposed. He stopped, head whipping to the left. Glorfindel's sword was out of its sheath in an instant. Where and how many? He asked calmly. There are at least 50 orcs a league away, the assassin said rapidly. They've just captured 2 people, a dwarf and a... Legolas paled and turned to Glorfindel, eyes wide with fear. It's Estelle. The orcs have him.